Full time in the cake tin. The game has just finished, literally just finished, between New Zealand and Australia to round off their Rugby Championships. The cross-Tasman rivals not playing for the Bledisloe Cup this time, but playing for a big finish to the Rugby Championship and hopefully a springboard into the November tests up north. Here are my thoughts immediately following the final whistle. Haven't really had time to completely gather my thoughts, so I'll do it as best I can, but this is your opportunity to leave your comment down below. Please do. And while you're there, give the video a thumbs up and hit subscribe. And yeah, spoiler alert, and congratulations, New Zealand, 33 points to 13. A scoreline which shows some domination, which there absolutely was in the second half, but it was a really spirited performance from Australia in the first 40. They just weren't able to hold on. I'm going to give some big picture thoughts initially, and then I'll delve into a bit of the details. So what are the takeaways from this one? Will Jordan is back, 15 on his back. And you know what? I've always thought, obviously he's an incredible rugby player, but I've always thought, oh, he plays his best rugby on the wing. But I kind of get why people in New Zealand that watch him week in, week out, really, really excited about a future with Will Jordan in the 15 jersey. He was outstanding. Wallace Satiti is the future. He's a barnstorming rugby player. Let's stick with New Zealand for a second. Hey, putting replacements on before 70 minutes works. There's a big takeaway for Scott Robertson. He used his bench early and in numbers, and the impact of the front row, Williams, Tosi, Ratima, the injection of pace he puts on the game, DMAC in that bench position. Is he just destined to just be the super sub? Maybe. He certainly looked like one today. Yeah, and the Wellington curse and the final quarter of the match curse lifted. And combine those two things, replacements coming on a bit earlier, and you're quite good in the final quarter of matches. I wonder if there's a relationship there. TJ rounds off an amazing All Black career. Going to miss his mullet and his haka. And on the haka and the anthem was amazing. The crowd were brilliant in this one. I'll come on to more of the occasion and the match in a second. Takeaways for Australia. Do you know what? Joe Schmidt's doing a really good job. I was looking at that, 33-13, and it was a pretty painful second half for the Aussies. What was it, 19-13 at half-time? But they could well and maybe should well have been going in ahead at half-time. And they're doing the best with the players that they have, I would say. They're working really hard. Their pack's showing a lot of spirit. There's effort, there's attitude, there's intent. There is just a lack of quality in the personnel, and that comes through in full-time scorelines like they're getting. They need crazy levels of fitness to be able to play the way that they were playing in the opening half hour for 80 minutes. It's going to be a really tough uphill challenge. I don't know how much better. I'm assuming they'll keep getting better under Joe Schmidt. I don't think without personnel they're going to be able to bridge the gap to these top teams in the world, but they're doing the very best that they can, which sounds really patronising, doesn't it? But that's honestly the way I see it. Fraser McReight, Harry Wilson and Bobby V is a international top-class back row. And they do have players that are playing really well. Tom Wright was great. But there's limitations to what you can do with the cattle that they have got out on the field. But a really, really good first half. Let's just say that was the best half of rugby from Australia that I have seen in a long time. So, on to the actual match itself. I mentioned the haka and the crowd. The crowd were brilliant in Wellington. I mean, almost to the point. I think I mentioned this on last week's after last week's games. After last week's Australia-New Zealand match. I don't know whether it's on the TV broadcast or whether it's there in the stadium. Just turn the singer down a little bit. When the crowd are belting out an anthem like that, you want to hear the crowd. So it was a great rendition of it. The atmosphere looked great. I'll even deal with a rendition of Sweet Caroline. I'll let that one slide. I know people have a love-hate relationship with Sweet Caroline. This Wellington crowd even carried on singing it after the music got turned down and play was underway. The two teams were playing on the field and they were still belting that song out. So good, so good, so good. I'd maybe think of some different ones. Let's mix it up a little bit, but hey, the crowd seemed to like it, so who am I to argue? Yeah, TJ's last haka. Poor TJ. Who's going to do it next then? Who would it be? because it's the elder of the Maori, right? That's who does it, isn't it? So would that be? I don't know actually. Who is it? Who would it be? Who's next cab off the rank leading the haka? Let me know in the comments down below, please. Yes. So we get to the game. Hey, it started on time. In Australia, they like to start fashionably late. You know, they're dead laid back in Australia. 10 minutes after it's supposed to kick off. Yeah, whatever. Started on time. And it was a great start for Australia. Well, actually, not a great start for Australia. Taniela Tupu looked like he'd done himself another injury and was going to be out for the game. As it was, he was hobbling around like he'd done some ligaments in his knee, but he was fine a few minutes later, played through it. And then there was Andrew Kellaway, little break with a chip and chase, pressure on from Australia, phase after phase, and a try for Fraser McReight. Aussies went for 7 points. They had an opportunity to go for 3 with a penalty, and it was a show of intent. A show of intent I wish they'd kept towards the end of the half, but I'll come to that. And then a really good attack from deep after it looked like Hunter Paisami had, and Hunter Paisami couldn't get the pass to Dylan Peach, I think it was, and it would have been an incredible move. Last pass went, and an opportunity for a 14-0 lead was spurned. But this was a total reversal from last week. Last week, New Zealand were completely dominant. This week, Australia were completely dominant in those opening stages, and New Zealand didn't have an answer to it. I was thinking, they might end up solving the last 20-minute scoring drought, but they're not going to be able to score in the first 20 instead. But Sevu Reece try on 16 minutes. And here was the difference between the two teams. I loved this try. Ardie Savia gets a turnover. Wallace Satiti, with some awesome footwork, holds 2 defenders to him, gets the offload off. Anton Linnett-Brown ends up with the ball. 25-metre pass off his left hand to Sevu Reece, who doesn't break stride and goes in at the corner. And that was the difference between the two teams. The All Blacks, 1 turnover, transition, try. In 1 phase. Australia, 10, 20 phases, repeated pressure, penalty, kick to corner, phase, try. And the amount of work that Australia were having to do for their points versus New Zealand was really, really noticeable. Lolesio scores a pen to make it 10-5, but then Will Jordan scores a try. And his footwork just completely did Fraser McReight, which is saying something because Fraser McReight's a handy player. Will Jordan made him look like he's just stepped onto a rugby pitch. 12-10 to New Zealand. And at this point, it was about 30 minutes in, I just noticed Angus Bell just kind of jogging from ruck to ruck, being a little bit of hey, I love Angus Bell. I'm not criticising him. I'm illustrating a point. He was sort of jogging from ruck to ruck like he was as you might have heard it called, a ruck inspector. He was kind of jogging there just to be first man, put his hand up, say he's guard. But point being, he was absolutely battered. He looked like he'd emptied the tank on half an hour. And there was a few Aussies running around in the same state. And this is my point. Sometimes you sort of think defending is tiring and attacking is fine. But I think it was the other way around with this one. I think for the most part, New Zealand were able to absorb and contain Australia and feel quite good about themselves defending, knowing they can hit them on the break. But Australia were having to work so hard to keep those forward pods together, to go phase after phase, which is why I was looking at Angus Bell on that 30-minute mark and going, this could get ugly in the second half. And it's to Australia's credit that the scoreline wasn't more than 33 against. But Fraser McReight was held up after Tom Wright made a break. They had penalty advantage and they went for 3 points at the end of the half. Unlike the start of the half where they'd gone for the corner and for the jugular. And it's easy to say this hindsight 2020 after the fact, but I thought then in that moment, no, you have to go for the 7. You have to go for the 7. As it is, they went for the 3 and instead of being 17-12 up, they're 13-12 up. And wouldn't you know it, before half-time, Caleb Clark goes in for a try. Really well-constructed try. 19-13 it was at half-time. And it was a line-out drive that got stopped. Penalty advantage. and New Zealand go to the right. Then as they come back to the left, Linnett-Brown crabbing across, Caleb Clark on a hard line, bosh, beautiful try. 60% possession, 60% territory Australia had, but New Zealand were ahead 19-13. Wallace Satiti, why always want to call him Walter? Wallace Satiti had looked great. And yeah, then we get into the second half where it was 2 tries for New Zealand. Ultimately, 14 points was all that was scored in the second half. And I think New Zealand will probably feel like they left some points out there. But a big part of that is that Australia did really well to keep New Zealand to just 33 points. But they weren't really able to fire many shots themselves, which is what they will reflect on. And again, I don't know. I mean, Joe Schmidt has forgotten more about rugby than I'll ever know. But I don't know how he gets more out of his team, because it looked like they were empty in the tank. It's going to be really hard for them to play and score enough points playing the way that they're playing. They're going to have to take every single chance and hope that they meet teams like New Zealand on a bit of an off day in order to win, or they need to find a way to be more deadly with their attacks rather than having to expend so much energy for every point that they score. If you sort of did a little formula of, or a sum of points to phases, New Zealand are just shredding it, and Australia are having to go through a lot of work. I made that point already. Anyway, it was Vai that scored a try. Well, it looked like he'd scored a try on 60 minutes. 60 minutes and 50 seconds. So you're going, yes, the 60-minute curse is been lifted, but it was disallowed for a knock-on. I thought it should have been given for a penalty against Cody Taylor there for playing it on the floor after he'd knocked it on. But anyway, D-Mac came on at 10. Beauden Barrett came on at fullback. Will Jordan went to the wing. Caleb Clark scores a lovely try. Beauden Barrett steps up into that pivot position. D-Mac was out the back, despite being D-Mac out the back, and he feeds the ball to Clark. A lovely, lovely try. I've missed out, haven't I, to Mighty Williams. The Mighty Williams scoring a try to make it 26-13 in the first place. That was after Will Jordan put his rocket boots on, didn't he? And it was from that break, tight work, and the Mighty Williams goes over. And I love the use of the bench in this game. The difference when Ratima comes on, the speed of the ball was amazing. Tosi gets a big turnover. The Mighty Williams scores a great try. And it just looks so much better for it. And there was, at the end, Australia, I made a note of this one, 23 phases Australia had on New Zealand's line. And New Zealand just went into D mode. And that summed up the game. 23 phases and Australia come up with nothing. New Zealand have a couple of chances in the second half. Shred Australia. So there you go. There's my thoughts on the game immediately following the full-time whistle. Yours, please, in the comments down below. Looking forward to South Africa against Argentina to round off the Rugby Championship. The Rugby Championship trophy is on the line in that game. But realistically, it looks like it's probably, I would guess at this point, I would suggest maybe a similar scoreline in the game later, or a similar margin of victory. In fact, I did predict a 20-point margin in both of these games. So I was bang on with this one. We'll see how it goes with the one next. But if you appreciate the content on the channel, hit subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. I'll see you on the next one.